From the Aishin Broadcast Studio, it's the Executive Spotlight.
Welcome to AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm Kyle Alexander, and today I'm joined by Ken Hill. He's the Managing Director at 700Credit. Hey, Ken, thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah. You are welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
So one thing I wanted to talk to you about today, kind of the main point of our conversation, we're talking about identity theft, identity fraud, and identity verification today. Obviously, this has been a big problem in the automotive dealership space. My first question for you, Ken, what kinds of fraud specifically are dealerships facing right now?
Oh, okay. We had identity theft, and the government came out with the red flags law, which I think did a good job of helping and raising awareness for dealers and putting in good processes, requirements that dealers have to have in place at their dealership around the red flag law, OFAC check, those types of things. But the new kid on the block is a problem called synthetic fraud. And it's problematic. These new fraudsters, a lot of them are fraudster rings. More than one person is doing this within a fraudster ring. They're creating identities at the credit bureaus by going online and filling out a credit app somewhere. Could be credit card, anything, with a fraudulent identity, with a real social, a name and address from possibly a different person. And so they're making up the identity. They fill out the credit app online, applying for a credit card, and naturally the bureau won't find it in their database. So they create a record. They create a credit file in the credit bureau database. And basically the next step is to build that file. And they go about that by paying someone to add that false identity to that person they're paying as an authorized user on one or more credit cards. So what that does is that false identity inherits all the payment history and good payment patterns for those credit cards from the person that they paid, right? And so that establishes good credit. Then they start to apply for various, other credit cards online and build their credit. And they're patient, which is dangerous. They take 2 years to do this on average. And they're working towards this bust out, right? They're building these lines of credit. They're not abusing them. They're making payments. They could be using it, but making payments. And then the bust out comes. And the bust out is where, right, they're going to, within 30 days before it's all reported, right, in a couple of days, actually, they're going to max all those credit lines with no intention of paying, running. And then the worst piece for automotive on the bust out is that they start to make high-end purchases. And the number one target for the high-end purchases are vehicles, recreational vehicles. So they'll walk into dealerships, apply for cars, get approved, and then they take off with the cars. A couple of the fraud rings that have gotten busted, right, they found them in a parking lot with 5 brand new cars or something like that. So that's the bust out, and that's the problem that dealerships are facing. And the traditional methods that were put in place around the red flag laws, out of wallet questions, which typically are based on your credit file, they don't work to stop this. And dealers, we did a survey, and I think it was like 60% of dealers had at least one vehicle stolen a month.
Wow.
35% were over 5. Average loss was well over $100,000. You know, do the math. And now there's and it's sort of created a controversy, right? Who's responsible for that vehicle? Is it the dealership or is it the lender, right? And also insurance, right? If you want dealerships to have insurance, right? And dealerships don't have anything in place to prevent this, they're not going to pay for the vehicle. So it's a big problem, and it's growing. I think it was over $8 billion last year.
Man.
In theft. So it's a problem, and
For sure.
and we're trying to educate dealers and get them up to speed as fast as we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's kind of keep talking about it here. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of very detrimental outcomes that come from synthetic fraud, and it's a very sophisticated kind of scheme, just based on your explanation there. I want to talk a little bit about something that I've heard in researching more on synthetic fraud, and that's an identity farm. Can you kind of tell me what an identity farm is and just how sophisticated can an identity farm be when it comes to this synthetic fraud?
Well, I've never heard that term before, but I believe what they're referring to is when these fraudsters do this, they're not just creating one, right? They're creating multiple. Or there's multiple fraudsters in a room, on a server farm, that are creating multiple IDs, right? So it's multiple identities that are being created with that, and building credit, and establishing lines of credit, building those credit scores for that bust out, and those can be sold as well, right? I can sell a fraudster. I could just be making these identities and then sell it to someone that that's going to execute the bust out.
Jeez. Again, just adding to the sophistication of what synthetic
and
fraud
they're patient.
can be. For sure.
They're
2
patient.
years.
So that's,
when you said that shocked me. 2 years for these to kind of take full effect.
Yep. Yeah. It takes almost 2 years. So
just crazy to kind of think that, something like this could take this long and, again, just build up all this kind of personal information. So when it comes to auto dealers and them dealing with synthetic fraud and just kind of identity fraud in general, how should dealerships handle customers' driver's licenses when they are in the store, and maybe even how should they handle their licenses when these customers are outside of the store? I know people are buying cars remotely now. Tell me a little bit about that process and how these licenses should be handled in both situations.
Sure. So we did, when synthetic fraud, when it first came on the scene 4 or 5 years ago, we did a campaign or a webinar. We also did a show at NADA. We had panels with the 3 credit bureaus, and they talked about their strategies, what they're doing for their customers to prevent this. And it's really get to know who your customer is. Do more data searches, do more things up front at the start of the process. And the number one thing that in getting to know your customer is validating their driver's license, right? Because if I'm doing the synthetic fraud, I need to build a file, but I also need a driver's license to purchase a car, right? So they're going to try and come in with a falsified license. When we first came out with our product, there was a couple of competitors on the market, but now there's probably a couple dozen that have driver's license verification tools. But basically, validate that consumer's license. Make sure that your validation includes validating it against the state specifications. State have specific specifications that you can check. So it's sort of like counterfeit money, right? They try to, integrate all these things that a counterfeiter might miss or very hard to replicate. Driver's licenses are becoming more and more secure like that. The latest versions are pixelated. They have thousands of little dots in them and stuff. But so, make sure you're validating the license itself. Also, you want to compare the information that's on the front to the information that's in the barcode. That barcode on the back, 3D or what have you, that's a standard that can be validated. So make sure you're doing that, comparing the information on the back to the front. Products now are doing selfies, right? The consumer has to take a selfie.
Sure.
With a mobile scanner, basically you're sending a link to the consumer, or maybe you're walking into the dealership and there's a QR code on the desk. You can scan that. That starts that process of the consumer taking the picture of the front and the back, and then a selfie. And then that selfie is biometrically compared to the image that's on the driver's license. So it's it eliminates people trying to, when they upload the selfie, uploading a document of a license they might stolen, and maybe they get an image off, YouTube or Facebook or one of the media, and they upload that as that image that they've just taken. So that is very effective. The liveliness detection is important. Also, right, you can do OFAC checks. We have the product that also does that information that we take off the front of the license bounce off public databases, ensure that it exists. Do a synthetic fraud credit data synthetic fraud check. Right, you're checking to see if that identity does have tendencies. There's synthetic scorecards that exist, and then also DMV. Right, there's DMV databases are becoming more and more accessible. So you want to take that information that you OCR'd off the front and bounce it off the DMV to make sure it matches. It should, right? Absolutely. So that's important. And we saw some dealerships that were implementing the scanners in finance office, but now we're seeing it. You need to move your protection as up the funnel as high as possible. And now they're doing it before a test drive. And there's mobile scanners, which are good, right, for remote deals, sending a link.
Sure.
But also that in-store process works because your sales rep's not touching the driver's license with a mobile scanner. Also physical scanners. We also offer physical scanners. I know there's a lot of physical scanners out there. Same thing, same process, right? Put the license in the scanner, and it validates, does all those same checks I mentioned before. They're even starting to come out with scanners now that have a camera on them, so you can do the selfie as well. I also heard clears in the market now, right? You clear at the airports. They're going to start being in dealerships. So make sure you're validating the identity. Get to know your customer.
For sure. Absolutely. That selfie idea is a great way to help with that, for sure.
Yes.
Yes. Now, you also kind of mentioned, too, moving this validation of licenses to kind of the top of this entire process. What does the workflow look like after that? What workflow maybe do you suggest for validating the identity of your remote customers compared to your in-store customers after that license is approved and validated? Certainly,
we would recommend doing it before the test drive, right? Because that eliminates people getting in a car and taking off down the road. Typically, we're seeing that those images retain on our server, or maybe a digital deal jacket somewhere, but that information is available to log in and look at from within the CRM, right? So it's either creating the record in the CRM or it's attaching to that record in the CRM so that they can go in and ensure and look at the results and then store it safely. So that's the workflow that we're seeing. Or you can have a physical scanner at the front desk, and that too can attach to the CRM record or create a record inside the CRM, and then you have access to view that data in another system. So those are the workflows that we're recommending. And of course, right, the remote deals, you can text a link. Or funny thing is, some of the things that we've heard from our customers, I mean, we've eliminated fraud at dealerships. Some of the things that we hear is, right, I was a little suspicious of that guy, sent him the link, never heard from him again. So no shows. People don't complete the process. And I don't think it's because there's too much friction for the consumer, because that's part of the buying process anyways, is to get an immaterial license.
Sure.
So they actually just, they stop.
Interesting. I mean, that's better than running into all these problems with fraud and everything at the dealership too. I mean,
Yes.
It's able to, kind of figure it out on the front end, then it removes the problem completely from what your customers are saying. So, I mean, that's the ultimate goal. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. And we're also seeing OEMs now requiring dealerships to have these things in place, especially if you have a history of fraud. The insurance companies, if you have this in place, we had a dealership tell us that they had a vehicle stolen and the insurance company wasn't going to pay. But then they showed them their process. They showed them that the license, you had a good license and it passed. And so the insurance company paid. It's if dealerships don't have it, appoint someone, start looking, because I think it's going to be in every dealership at some point in the future.
Something else we were kind of talking about a little bit earlier on in our conversation is some of just the different legislation that's kind of passed through that's affecting, non-public customer information. Let's talk a little bit more about the safeguards rule from a few years ago in 2022. What do dealers need to do to protect and store this non-public customer information in accordance with this rule? Any suggestions, things to look out for that dealers need to know?
There's a lot under the covers with that regulation, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Dealers have to, everywhere that they're taking consumer information, they have to define a process to ensure that they're safeguarding it. And that process needs to be auditable, right? How am I safeguarding? Think about, where dealers accept information, right? Service lane, front desk, right? I think the front desk sign-ins, right, or information, those are going to be a thing of the past, right? Think about everywhere, your website cookies, right? All these places, various places in your dealership where you're collecting, you have to safeguard it, right? Name and address. It's not just PII. You have to safeguard their name and address. Right. And one of the biggest, I think, points of failure is 50% of dealerships are still using paper deal jackets.
Wow.
Right. And that's going to be a thing of the past. If you're using paper deal jackets today, appoint someone to run a committee to get away from, work with your vendors to get away from paper deal jackets. That's something that we work with dealers every day. How do I get my data that I need to store into that electronic deal jacket, whether it's the demo? Most 70% of dealers that do have electronic are using the DMS deal jacket. Some are using Route 1 Dealer Tracks deal jacket. Some are using third-party deal jackets. There's a couple of good providers out there. Right, the biggest point of exposure for handling consumer information could be the driver's license, right? Do do you have sales reps? And some daughter bought a car not too long ago, and the sales rep said, hey, text me your driver's license, but front and back images, right? Don't do that, right?
That's just
now I got
a mess
that,
waiting to happen.
Yeah, that's class action all over.
Right.
That sales rep's phone, you don't want driver's license images on that sales rep's phone. Nor do you want to make paper copies, right? That Xerox machine has a memory.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. And not only that, you're typically, when you're making those paper copies of the driver's license, you're taking the consumer's driver's license and you're going in a back room somewhere. Where are you going with it? What's happening? And then, some dealerships take those paper copies and they scan them and manually put them in their electronic deal jacket. Look for solutions that automatically take the images from that, either the mobile scanner that the validator or the physical scanner, and they take them and they put them right into the deal jacket. So you're reducing handling of that consumer's license. Only authorized personnel can see those images. They can see the results. Hey, this passed. Images are in that electronic deal jacket, and you don't have to worry about your processes. And you get rid of all your paper copies of driver's licenses. We heard a story not too long ago of a dealership who had that somebody broke into the dealership. The only thing they took were their paper deal jackets.
Wow.
So why do you think they took those, right?
All the information.
Yeah. And back in the day when I first got in automotive, back in the 90s, a big thing were sales reps at dealerships that were taking paper copies of driver's license images and credit reports and handing them out the back door, right? And selling them to people. So, there is, and some of these big dealership groups, right? It's thousands of employees. How do you ensure you have good processes in place across all those dealerships? So really evaluate how you're handling driver's license. If you have a breach and they come into your dealership, the data breach, and you've got data all over the place, you're not securitizing it, you're going to be in trouble.
Absolutely. All the more reason to maybe look at a digital dealer those digital deal jackets to just help keep everything way more secure and not out in the open where people can just pick it and run. For sure. Ken, I appreciate all of your time today. I just like to ask one more question to all of our guests. Is there anything else that you would like to mention or highlight regarding identity theft, fraud, or verification?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is, evaluate how you're handling consumer information and how you're capturing and authenticating driver's licenses in your dealerships. I think that's the key takeaway. Change is coming, is happening. Don't be a change resistor. Adopt and put some processes in place.
Awesome. Ken, I appreciate again all of your time you've taken for this today. Thanks for joining me here on Executive Spotlight.
Thank you for having me anytime. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.